11:02. Should we go ahead and get started? Hey, what do you think?
I think we are good.
Right. Welcome, everyone, to another exciting webinar on Microsoft 365 Copilot. I'm joined today by our CTO, Nathan Lazowski, who will help me in diving into some of the specifics that really cover AI in the workplace that you'll want to be thinking about as you look to roll out Copilot. My name is Chris Blackburn. If you've been on some of my webinars or to some other presentations, I'm not an unfamiliar face, but for those of you that are joining us for the first time, I've been here at Concurrency for 8 years. I've been in Microsoft Consulting for 20. This is my first year. I just started as a member of the board on the the Minnesota Microsoft 365 user group, which is one of the biggest in the country. So excited to have you all join us here, as well as some of those user group meetings. Father of three, been in the architect and delivery space on Microsoft 365 for probably almost a decade. It's hard to believe that Office 365 has been kind of game time for the last 10 years. And then when I'm not behind the keyboard, I actually travel the world as a DJ, and I love food as well. So I usually like to incorporate some of those into some of my presentations as well. So thanks for joining us today. As we look to dive into today's presentation, really the concepts that are first and foremost around AI is that everyone deserves to use it. As we look at the Microsoft domains inside of their products, really they have separated AI and Copilot into these 6 core areas. And so I want you to be thinking about those core areas and how those really touch your business today, and be thinking about, are you leveraging the full power of the Microsoft 365 stack today within each of these areas? If you're an E3 or E5 customer, there's probably a chance there may be some features that you may or may not be using, or there may be some features that you're planning to use as part of enterprise agreement or licensing. And so I want to be thinking about those as we talk about AI and how some of those features can really empower your users to do more and allow your users to take tasks that they do on an everyday basis and free that time up from them and take that burden off of them and let AI help them do some of that work and help them be a little more efficient. And as part of looking at that AI story, Microsoft and us, Concurrency as a Microsoft partner, as we work with customers like you, recognize that there are efficiencies that can be gained by applying AI all the way out through the Microsoft product stack, and even looking at plugins, which we'll talk about a little bit, and some of those solutions that can then take some of your business use cases, even outside of just normal Office 365 and Microsoft 365 Copilot, and make your organization more efficient. So that's where we want to spend a lot of our time today, outside of looking at what's new and cool in the world of Microsoft 365 Copilot, and get you to be thinking about how you can take commodity and custom AI, which we'll revisit here in kind of that definition here in a moment, to everyone in your organization, to all the business personas, and really build out that concept of a COE or a center of excellence. So we'll talk about that a little bit more here in this presentation as well. And so as we look at those uses of AI, let's talk about what's new with Copilot as of this Monday. So it's been a really exciting week in the Microsoft world. Microsoft has dropped the limits for getting Copilot. That 1 seat minimum, really all it is. And even myself, as I've gone into my own retail tenant, I've been able to turn that on within my tenant, and so now that's available to anyone. You can work through your volume license channels if you're using a CSP, or even if you're buying your licenses straight from Microsoft themselves. You can go and purchase that capability right now. And as part of that, Microsoft has really kind of done away with the need to go in and enable semantic indexing or even control the semantic indexing. All of that is occurring natively as soon as you get Copilot as part of your licensing. As soon as you turn on that licensing, you're going to have that available to you. So what does that look like? Well, let me take you on the journey that I went down in enabling Copilot within my environment. First, I want to talk about kind of what you can get from a licensing perspective. I'll really touch on these just super quick because I think a lot of us have heard the story how Microsoft has rebranded Bing Chat Enterprise and really made it this Copilot for Microsoft 365. You can go to copilot.microsoft.com right now and use that same GPT level 4 functionality for free and be able to generate documents or not generate text, generate graphics. It's a really cool tool that will then build the foundation on your being able to then, once you license Microsoft 360 Copilot, really take it to that next level to where then your tenant has some of that priority access. You can then use Copilot in the web or in your Office applications. It's then once you start to then look at that Microsoft Copilot for the Copilot for Microsoft 365, that enterprise Copilot SKU, you really then start to enable it in tools like Teams. You get some of that enterprise grade data protection and being able to use tools like the Copilot Studio to do some customization within that space. So from a licensing perspective, those are your options as you then go in to purchase some of those licenses. From my perspective, when I was able to enable it, and then you'll probably see it from a CSP and enterprise perspective, having that 1 seat minimum, you do have to agree to a 1-year commitment. And you also have to set up a new billing agreement inside of your Microsoft 365 account. So that is allowing Microsoft to then bill for each of those licenses at a 1 year at a time rate. And then once you have that set up and you then have your first Copilot licenses inside of your tenant, if you go then and look at what services are enabled as part of the Copilot license, you can see these are all included within the Copilot for Enterprise, the Microsoft 365, being able to enable it inside of your productivity apps. You then have that chat capability, which is similar to what we see with the copilot.microsoft.com. It's then really at office.com/chat. And then that capability gives you something that you don't see within the Copilot for Microsoft. And that's really the capability to re-access a lot of those saved chats and conversations and to continue those after you have initiated them. So that's where the chat comes into play. And then some of the additional integrations. So the intelligent search really is that semantic index enabling, and then the graph connectors and the Power Platform connectors, that enables you to do more with the Copilot tool. So really exciting to be able to jump in, purchase Copilot. Once that is done, you can send a nice little message. Microsoft's built that into the tooling from a licensing perspective that you can let your users know, the ones that have been really excited to get Copilot, that they finally have that capability in their hands. From an admin perspective, you'll then now see a new blade inside of the admin center. So some of the capabilities that you'll see within here more or less are informational. So for example, the Copilot for Bing is just letting you know about commercial data protection. Same thing with looking at some of the security Copilot, which, that is still in a private preview, so you won't be able to access anything within that portal just yet. But being able to do things like enable and disable the grounding from public web content, if you just wanted to allow your end users to create documents and content based off of information that's inside of your tenant and not your tenant plus any public information, you have that ability to control that at a tenant level. And then being able to control plugins, that's actually generally available across your tenant to be able to add those plugins into the Office apps and then be able to integrate those into Copilot as well. And then the big one, I think, we'll touch a little bit here within this presentation is kind of that concept of data security and compliance. That really does build you out into that Microsoft story around Purview and some data compliance and being able to build out some of those tool sets to ensure that your data is secure and that your data is protected within your environment as your users start to leverage Copilot themselves. So from an admin perspective, that's what you'll see. From an end user perspective, your users will then be able to go to office.com. They'll be able to see this Copilot icon, and they'll be able to do these searches. It's very similar to Copilot for Microsoft, and being able to see some of their searches after they go in and do some of that capability. They go in and create a search. They want to generate a document based off of information. It then goes in and gives you the ability to look at some of your most recent conversations, emails, documents that you use to be able to use this chat capability as a springboard to be able to go in and create some of those searches. And just to remind everyone that the public version, you can still do some of these same searches. You just can't reference your own tenant's information, and you don't have the saved chat capabilities. So that is another big added value of the Microsoft 365 Copilot integration into your environment. And so as users are starting to use Copilot, some of the questions that we've gotten asked is really how is that capability of users being able to find their data? And then we remind customers of the underlying component really that drives Copilot is the semantic index. And so what makes the semantic index different than a traditional keyword index is that it creates this multi-dimensional space of data points and cluster those within a vector space. So, as you can see in this very tiny little diagram, which unfortunately I can't zoom in too much on that particular one. So yeah, you can see there's all these little words that are within this index cluster. And then what it does is it creates those within their same multi-dimensional space. So that's how that indexing works. And as we look at indexing from the perspective of how it applies to your Microsoft 365 environment, here's a list of all of the data that it does and does not crawl. So looking at user level data, I can look at my data in my mailbox. I can look at my documents. I can look at any web pages that I might have access to, OneNotes, etc. All these are considered grounding for Copilot searches. And then if we want to supplement that with web grounding, we have the ability to control whether or not that's turned on and turned off. From the tenant perspective, it does add a little bit from the archive SharePoint data perspective to be able to find that data. But one thing to be able to call out is if I'm trying to look at data that's in any of my shared mailboxes, any delegated mailboxes, so that's a mailbox that you can look at and access, and archive mail data, so that's archive mailboxes. Those are content types that are not indexed in the semantic index. So in most cases, it's active data. It's data that you have access to. That's the glory of Copilot, is it can look at anything within the space of data that you have access to and gives you the ability to control if it's data that's in a team site or a SharePoint site, if individuals can access that. A lot of that's done through things like purview, labeling, and information protection as well. And so from the perspective of the semantic index, one thing to keep in mind from an enablement perspective, it's automatically enabled. You can go and you can look at specific users. You can go into the search and intelligent page to be able to look at some of that. But then from the perspective of looking at an order of priority is probably the best way to put it. Tenant level enablement for tenants over 300, they're going to get priority number one. Priority number two is going to be your chats. Priority number three is going to be really that user level enablement. And then based on if a 300 user organization is enabling Copilot over a business standard premium, that organization is going to get precedence over the smaller ones. So just to let you know from the perspective of how it's going and crawling your content there, that will give you a little bit of detail around that capability. However, just to call out as a disclaimer, Microsoft, if you can't open a ticket to ask when your tenant's going to be crawled, because I guarantee you after the release this week, there's probably quite a bit of backlog of tenants whose data is being crawled. I even ran into that myself today as I was trying to create a sample search of a document that I knew it had access to, but because it hadn't crawled it yet, it said it couldn't provide any results on it. So that was just an example of some of the data that it has to go through and create some of those indexes on within the environment before it's ready for use. So lots of exciting things happening this week in that space of technical enablement, but we really want to spend a few minutes to talk about something more than that. It's readiness. There's a lot that goes into readiness when it comes to AI and your environment. To talk a little bit about how we've engaged with customers, I want to hand the microphone over to Nathan to kind of talk a little bit about the AI org maturity curve that we've been discussing with a number of our customers.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I think one of the most important things to think about in the context of AI is that it's a journey and you're on that journey, and you start off with some big ideas, and you start off with this mission that you have the opportunity to be able to accomplish. And the best companies are the ones that step back and think about that in the context of the organization. They don't kind of look at it just incrementally. But what we've also found is that many organizations are somewhere on a maturity curve at any given point. And sometimes you may even be at different points, multiple points on the maturity curve based upon separate business units within your organization. So where a lot of companies start is they're doing a lot of traditional analytics. They're exporting content from existing sources. They're in the context of Copilot, they're writing their own emails, they're making their own PowerPoints, they're producing content manually. In the context of analytics, they're exporting it to Excel, and they're taking something that's live data and they're turning it into static data that they're making decisions around. What we find is that companies, as they're getting into the AI space, both in the commodity lane and in what we call the mission-driven lane, is they have to identify where are the value-driven use cases so they can measure them and validate that they're getting the returns that they expect. So many organizations, they're starting with understanding what initial use cases and initial teams are to be able to prove out the value. So we see that in the Copilot spaces, like who are the 300? Who are those Spartans who are getting the first 300 licenses? Now it's changed to, it could just be who are the first 5. And we want those 5 people, or there's 10 people, or there's 300 people to be successful as they build momentum through the organization. In the context of custom AI efforts, it's we want that first initial AI use case to prove value, or at least show that it was capable of doing what we talked about it doing, that gives the momentum to achieve other AI use cases. That gets partnered with something around governance and enablement. So organizations, in order to be successful at this, need 2 parts of this. They need governance around the data to ensure that the right people have access to the right data. So when it is indexed by semantic index, it's made available to the right individuals. And then also there's an enablement function. Every individual in your organization has the opportunity to be more with AI. We need to ensure that they have the right skills necessary to leverage that AI capability to be able to be more. And that doesn't always happen just by accident or automatically for an individual. They've been doing a job for the last 10 years that they do at your organization, and a lot of their sort of personal equities built up into that function that they perform. You may be asking them to do something new in the future, but that may not come naturally as a transition point. So the human transition of AI is really important as part of that enablement story. As you get past that, you earn the right to scale. That you earn the right to scale Copilot across the whole organization, and you earn the right to scale AI efforts inside the organization that are mission-driven opportunities. And that gets paired to what is a scaled pattern. So as I am scaling out Copilot, what does my scaled enablement function look like? As I am scaling out mission-driven opportunities, what does the building of custom plugins for Copilot or custom AI supply chain models look like? How many chatbots am I building? And are they all the same, or are they separate chatbots? How do they talk to each other? All of that goes into scaled patterns. So the growing of the organization in the AI space is really about what does adoption look like at scale? And then at this top lane, you can see AI as a research domain. And this is where you start leveraging AI not just to solve specific ROI driven use cases or to achieve acceleration of commodity use cases, but you start using it as a way to be able to accelerate where you're going to go in the future and to discover where you're going to go in the future. Scenario modeling, researching your product mix. What should I be doing in the future? Enabling your research teams to be more. And for some of us, that's like a long way off, but many organizations are doing that today. So this represents where your organization can be, and you're probably somewhere on this curve right now. So if we move to the next diagram, what we're going to see is that there's essentially two lanes that are coupled to this human-centric AI idea. So at the top lane, you see this mission-driven factory, this idea of selecting custom use cases that may plug into Copilot, they might not plug into Copilot, that are centric to driving new revenue or operational savings, that it's a competitive advantage for your business. It's, I'm going to build a supply chain optimization model that allows me to optimize how much inventory I have at any given point. That's not so much a Copilot use case as much as maybe Copilot could be used to ask questions of it. Below that exists the commodity lane. And the commodity lane is really where we talk about the primary initial use cases for Copilot, which is I need to write an email faster, summarize my meeting, create a new presentation, know who I should be talking to in my sales forecast. These commodity opportunities are where every individual within your organization has the opportunity to be more as a result of that. But both of these are united by the idea that if we really step back, our number one job is to enable every human in our organization to be able to leverage AI as a component of their skills. And this is not necessarily a natural thing. This is where we have to, as leaders, need to think about this as a big picture and almost think about it bigger than the hype right now, that this is our opportunity to be able to help all people become more. So in the diagram that follows this, what you'll see is a little bit of a breakdown of what we mean by commodity and custom, if it wasn't already clear. So commodity is Copilot type use case. And it still says Bing Chat Enterprise. Commodity type use cases. GitHub Copilot, accelerating dev activities, right? Bing Chat Enterprise or Copilot, Microsoft, Copilot.microsoft.com, functioning as a chat GPT type platform. Office 365 Copilot. All the general commodity Copilot capabilities that lift up the productivity of every human. On the right-hand side, you see things that drive direct ROI. Not that commodity doesn't drive ROI, but these are very much tied to, I'm going to increase sales by X%. I'm going to reduce the calls coming to my customer service team by X%. I'm going to reduce my time to quote by X hours. These are very specific initiatives that fall into a ROI-driven activity, but then relate into the commodity. These two things will cross over all the time. There's a great opportunity for one to ask questions of the other and for them really to play in the same sandbox. So from here, Chris is going to start talking a little bit about how do we start thinking about our org and roles in the context of some of these lanes.
Thanks for that overview of the different ways to achieve that AI, on that AI maturity curve, and looking at it in the context of the different spaces. And then at the end, those different spaces of commodity and custom really do intersect at your business. They intersect at the people in your business. They intersect at the different personas that power your business. And showing here in this diagram is a very typical organization structure, where most organizations, they have executive leadership, they have a C-suite, and underneath of those, you have very similar functions like marketing, sales, and finance. And what we've seen as we've worked with customers, both big and small, as we've started to ideate different uses of AI in both commodity and custom space, that there may be industry specific examples. A lot that we work in Concurrency is manufacturing. We've worked in verticals like finance, healthcare, etc. Those each have their own little different spins of what these personas might look like. But bringing us back to that discussion that human-centric AI and the fact that everyone in our organization deserves the right to use AI means that there are jobs that they're doing today that are enabling the mission of your business, that they're doing repeatedly, that they're spending lots of time on, that AI can help them to do more with. And so as we look at some of the following slides, I wanted to give you some examples of where you may see commodity AI occurring. And in this case, this would be an account executive. It could be really anyone in your organization that can take that use of commodity AI through something like a Microsoft 365 Copilot for PowerPoint to be able to quickly generate content that can save lots of time. We've seen use cases in sales orgs and marketing orgs that can help them create content. In some cases, in sales orgs, they're recreating custom content based on templates, based on customer research all the time. And that's something that the commodity AI space can help them save hundreds of hours a year and over again pays for that licensing cost to put AI into their hands through something like Copilot for Microsoft 365. We then see really that intersection as we look at industry specific use cases. Let's say, for example, in the insurance industry, an insurance adjuster spends countless hours taking photographs, analyzing them, determining what is happening in those photos to be able to write out a report. And being able to take services like AI and Azure and using Vision to be able to write out a detail of not only what's occurring in that photo, but then being able to detail some of that damage is a game changer in those industries. And this is just one industry example. We've got dozens of other examples. Nathan did an amazing job in a couple of different presentations that you can find on our YouTube channel. I've shared a bunch with regards to some of these custom AI use cases, and those may resonate with you. So definitely recommend taking a look at some of those webinars that we've done, just looking at some of the custom AI use cases that might be industry specific. As we look further into those examples in the context of today's webinar, we've had an opportunity to kind of sit back and look at 6 core personas that we've seen across a number of our different customers and really think about where are those intersections between commodity AI and custom AI. So let's look at marketing. If you've got a marketing team in your organization, they're working to look at data from customers to be able to figure out, okay, how can we build out marketing campaigns that are successful in targeting those customers? How do we build out templates, press releases, content for websites, blogs, images for LinkedIn? Those are all great from the commodity space. And as we start to look at doing more in marketing, being smart about marketing, and being able to look at the data that exists within your organization, that's where we really then start to intersect in that custom space where we have data warehouses, we have pipelines where we want to look at all of our customers' data and what they're buying and who we're sourcing data from to be able to be smarter about how we build those marketing campaigns. We want to be able to consolidate analytics from different sources, websites, etc., to help us understand where to really drive some additional success in our marketing dollars and our marketing teams, and then being able to really increase that funnel by optimizing that spend to where we are then being very laser focused in how we market to our customers based on ML models. And that's taking that data that's already existing and it's leveraging AI to help us have smart dashboards and being able to recommend how we should communicate to our customers and being able to then empower our sales organizations. And the sales organizations are also very important and vital to being able to look at our key customers. What are some activities that are occurring around those customers, set goals and milestones, and look at high priority deals, being able to schedule meetings, webinars, trips, etc. All those really exist within that custom AI space. But then once we really then start to layer on a lot of tools that exist within that Microsoft stack, it could be Viva for goals, it could be Sales for CRM, it could be Fabric around the data. We can do a lot more. We can look in that custom space to drive revenue through quoting actual elements, and then being able to look at increasing revenue by looking at appropriate pricing and looking at those sales and based on the scenarios and looking at the market within each of those different customer regions, being able to auto-complete some of those drafts based on not only templates that you have, but data sets that live within your data lakes, within your fabric. And then at the end, that allows us to then take and focus the energy of our sales teams by combining not only the commodity copilots, but also the custom ones. So that way they can also be laser focused at their jobs objectives and not spending a lot of time with a lot of the busy work that comes along with that particular role. So those are two really core functions that we've seen customers, as we've ideated some of these use cases, start to build out how to interact with their data smarter in that custom space using AI. Looking at demand and supply businesses, there's a lot more that can go into this. There's a lot that goes into supply chains at a very high level, looking at things like inventory and pipelines, and being able to convey information at a macro level into a dashboard, or even a micro level, I think is probably the better way to put it. Being able to look at some of those details and being able to communicate inventory levels. Those are things that can happen through things like Power Automate, but then enabling Power Automate and your data that lives within your databases, your data warehouses, to take some of that demand and supply information to provide more accurate promise to time to promise, and being able to reduce how much inventory you have on hand, and being able to properly forecast based on what your customer needs are, and using AI to power that is a game changer. And being able to look at any sort of bugs in how that data is being reported, and being able to help with resolution in different ERP systems, which we see customers that are global organizations dealing with multiple business units, multiple ERP platforms. How nice would it be to bring that into one place to be able to see where there are issues with some of that demand planning, and being able to drive a lot of that based on the demand that lives within those different business units, and then being able to reduce inventory. I think that's the biggest thing from demand and supply in manufacturing, is not overbuying, so that way you don't underproduce for the demand that lives within your space. So that's a good example from demand and supply. Looking at your development teams, there's a lot of capabilities that being able to develop drafts of applications, to getting suggestions for code, for being able to use AI to do some of the more remedial tasks, so you can multitask, being able to validate code and test plans, and results from being able to pull requests and document that code. A lot of that exists today within that GitHub, Copilot for GitHub, and some of the Copilot for Power Platform, and being able to take those real world examples from a development perspective of doing more and accelerate some of that conversion to code to different languages. And so, you may, as an organization, have one customer that is .NET, you may have one that's PHP, you want to have one that's different technology stacks. Being able to use AI to help you do that smarter will not only allow you to work faster, but then as you're looking to build out some of those code personas and some of those base GPT environments to anonymously build code for those different use cases within those different business units, is an example where you're taking multitasking to the next level, because AI can do that for you and still build out those GPT-like engines for the rest of your organization. And then for IT, all of us want to be able to work more efficiently in our IT world, and being able to look at our IT costs, being able to draft communications to end users, respond to emails, create presentations, and do things like summarize outages and incidents and be able to communicate those. There's a number of AI-based tools today through virtual agents and Copilot for Microsoft 365 and Security Copilot that'll allow us to then do more as we take that next level, integrate into some of our CMDBs and our help desk platforms, so that way we can provide intelligent responses using chatbots to look at that data, so your end users can leverage AI to talk to your specific use cases based on your company or based on your end users. And then really at that last moment, when all different venues have been exhausted, to then connect them to a human is something we're seeing more and more in lots of different industries, to allow their teams to do more and allow AI to be that first line of defense. And then even over and above, and providing security and visibility into activities at that faster than human speed, so that way when an incident occurs the moment it occurs, without having to engage are certainly some examples that we've seen within our customers. And then finally, from professional services, from like someone like a Concurrency where IT and services intersect, being able to look at best practices and provide data and visibility and data management, recap summaries to meetings, draft rough orders of magnitudes, respond to RFPs, and drafting sales. Some of that we can do with the Copilot for Microsoft 365, but once you add in things like virtual agents, sales plugins, as you're working with customers, you can have virtual chat on your website to help with bookings and inquiries. You can align those service offerings and sales pipelines to enhance visibility into your needs, and then have those next best actions for customers and follow up based on things like text or video or photo analysis. That can help too. We saw that before with the vision example, where being able to help accelerate your interaction with customers means you can do more, and it means the customer is happier because their time to be able to receive that product has reduced substantially. So lots of different use cases across a multitude of different personas. As we look at that preparation for Copilot and thinking of those different personas and the technology and our businesses, we've encountered a number of different questions from a number of our customers. So there's this concept of the customer conversations that we have versus kind of the customer thoughts in terms of readiness. So we've definitely seen both sides of those conversations for Copilot, and being able to prepare your tenant, as well as ensuring that your data is ready, your licensing is ready. And then what does it look like when we start talking about personas and the cost of that $360 per person per year, being mindful about who gets it and what stages are conversations that help go into that conversation of piloting Copilot. And then really trying to dissuade customers from where those initial thoughts are in AI. And a lot of it comes through education. It's being on webinars like these. So that way, what is those right steps to avoid just turning it on or looking at just the commodity use cases, or even in some cases, having readiness and thinking that everything in your environment is 100% ready for AI, because there's definitely security implications that you want to be mindful of around your users and around your data, and the accessibility of that data that you want to make sure that you are ready for as you go into these conversations. And so as we take another look at that full of the AI adoption cycle, having that executive alignment to have human-centric AI in the hands of everyone is that first big step that you want to ensure that you have buy-in and from your leadership, because that'll show immensely as you start to approach the rest of the business and all of your different personas, your different departments, to go through that concept of envisioning, because that's going to really drive a lot of that ROI, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But being able to flush out those scenarios to where you can look at that state of pilot to be able to show the business, we know AI is the future. We have great use cases for it. Now let's enable it and be able to show the rest of the organization to put AI into everyone's hands, takes us down that adoption cycle. And so in thinking about that adoption cycle and potentially where you might be as an organization and how someone like a Concurrency can help guide you down that path, we have engaged in these concepts of workshops with our customers. We've done that at no cost to our customers because we want them to go down that AI journey on the right way. And as part of that is going through envisioning. It's taking and thinking about our personas and our high impact scenarios, looking at our optimization, our readiness, and then really starting to dig in deep and build those out, and then potentially even understand more after you have built out that map of use cases and say, we need to look at our data more. We need to look at our modern workplace environment more, our Office 365 environment more, security more. That's where we can take it next steps after the envisioning to really help you then start to define where you might want to end on that journey. But starting on that journey and thinking about personas really does begin here. It's saying we want to embrace AI, but we want to understand who all is going to be impacted on AI and what are their challenges that they are encountering on a day-to-day basis. Some of those commodity versus custom use cases that we discussed on some of the earlier slides all started here. It all started at thinking about challenges that are being encountered on a day-to-day basis within each of these drive bowls. Once you start to then think about where those challenges are, then that next step is going to be looking at building out that ROI and actually a number of our customers, and probably a big reason why Microsoft has relaxed some of that licensing number is they have that same belief that everyone should have AI, but having that licensing barrier was an impediment, but it's still a cost impediment, whether it's 300 or 30. In a lot of organizations, being able to justify that ROI is important. And so having those personas built out, being able to quantify the challenges, being able to understand who it impacts and how much time they do each week really is very foundational. It's a great, solid foundation around ROI for being able to move into that AI space. And then from there, it's then determining what are those right building blocks. Is it a custom versus commodity scenario? If it's in either of those scenarios, determining what the right technology is for being able to solve that problem is important too. Whether it is going to be just a Microsoft 365 Copilot to help with easy task like drafts, never having to create them from scratch, to the more custom scenarios that involve your data and how your business works and being able to transform that. Really, the sky's the limit when it comes to thinking about the challenges in your business, because they're everywhere. We see them in all customers that we work with, big and small. There are challenges, both big and small, of their own as well, that as we start to think about the ROI, then we start to think about which ones are the highest priority. We can think about some of those personas and some of those teams that are going to provide the most immediate ROI for the business and their bottom line by enabling those scenarios. And so sitting down and thinking of those from a priority perspective, looking at them potentially based on horizons. So what can we do now? What we want to do, in 3 months? What do we want to do by the end of 2024? Is another great approach. And then finally, we've worked with some customers that have also looked at the concept of RICE scoring and being able to take different metrics based on the scenario, the people in the organization, and what they're trying to accomplish, and being able to give it an arbitrary score. So that way we can say these particular use cases are the highest scored ones. If we were to tack just those 2 or 3, we would pay for Copilot over and above what that licensing cost is. So these are areas that Concurrency, we are helping customers on a daily and weekly basis, and certainly want to do the same for you as you are going down that AI journey. And as part of that, we put together some offerings to be able to help with you as you step out of that envisioning process, to be able to help you in these 3 core areas. That first core area is really readiness. It's looking at any gaps that are critical to the success of AI and also to the success of your organization, especially in that modern workplace area. Looking at security gaps, data estate and data readiness, thinking about who those pilot groups are is that first core step. The second step really is looking at establishing a center of excellence and doing that within your organization. We have a managed service where we can come in and provide thought leadership, because in a lot of cases, we're looking at the commodity AI use cases. It's how do we as humans interact with a computer, which we've all been doing at some level for 30, 40, 50 years now that technology has been around. It's been traditionally through a keyboard. The next generation is going to be through chat. It's going to be talking to your computer. We've all seen the sci-fi movies of the future. We are right on that cusp of taking data and technology and being able to interact with it in a very intelligent fashion on a computer. And we want to be able to help your organization be ready for that and be able to help you provide that guidance that we've seen with customers that we've worked with just within the last 6 months, in helping to take them down that commodity AI story, and even longer in helping customers that we've worked with from an AI perspective in its different iterations over the last 7, 8 years. So AI is nothing new. It's just more enabled and more in the hands of humans. And so we have that center of excellence to help with being able to look at the management and tracking of those different use cases, to be able to help with training and education, and adhering to some best practices in the configuration, as well as in how to even talk to AI. What are going to be some of those best phrases to give to your users to help them get the most success and the most return out of AI? And then help you down that journey of not only pilot and production rollout, but then that broader concept of AI governance, even over and above what is in that commodity space and extending into the custom space. And then really digging into that custom space and looking at that AI product factory as we go through and build out use cases based on personas and the right building blocks with our customers. We usually flesh out a number of different custom use cases that intersect with how your business works and how your data is accessible, and how we can then transform the two of those together, being able to just sit down and ideate some of those solutions and build out some of those in a pilot fashion, and then looking at the full story of ML ops and that life cycle are use cases and projects that we're doing on an accelerated basis now, with the advent of the commodity AI driving that need for more of that custom AI as well. Anything else, Nathan, that you'd like to add to this based on kind of what we've seen with our customers?
Yeah, I think you said that really well. One of the biggest transitions I think every employee of your organization is going to have is this idea that they have an assistant. This idea that, like, over here is this AI assistant and it does something for them, and that assistant is going to evolve very quickly in what it does today versus what it does tomorrow versus what it does the day after that. And every employee has to get comfortable with this idea of, like, handing tasks that assistant is capable of doing. Like, it's like, if any of you have kids, right? Like, you start off with your kids like doing tasks that aren't super meaningful, and they eventually become very productive members of your household. You call it the window of work for your kids. Well, there's this window of work of AI, and it's going to continue to accelerate higher and higher and higher to a point where it becomes an autonomous assistant for us. This is that entry point that, like, those of us who lived through the beginning of the internet, like, lived through that, like, transition of not having it and then having it, or the cell phone, like not having a cell phone and then having a cell phone. We're all now living through that process of not having an AI assistant, then having one in its infancy, and then having one that's really autonomous through that process. And that's a really exciting thing that all of us get to go through. But in order to successfully do that within your organization, you usually need to establish these programs and practices that help your organization down the path. It's not just going to happen on its own, and that's what we're describing here within this AI journey.
That's perfect. Thanks, Nathan. It brings up to mind a conversation I had with my 11-year-old. It's like, why don't we let computers do everything for us, and like we can sit back? And I think in our world as we've been growing up, that definitely was a foreign concept. But for our kids in the future, I don't think that's going to be very much. It will be AI, and technology is really enabling them to have a better life, because they're not having to do as much as they do now, because technology will help enable that for them. So it's a better world that we're leaving for the future. So thanks again for that input, Nathan. And then as we look at kind of those foundational steps, and being able to help you as an organization, we have put together what we call this Copilot optimization assessment. It's about 20 questions, 25, I think, that you can fill out, and it will help us at Concurrency to really give you that readiness indicator and give you a score around areas of your M365 adoption, your productivity tool usage, and your data security. And so we want to do this as a courtesy to you, to kind of help you down that journey as you're thinking about those personas and you're ideating on where are there areas that you could be doing more in your organization with AI. This is a great start to ensuring that your environment is ready for AI. And so, I dropped that link in the chat. If you want to fill that out, we'll follow up with you with that score that will not only give you that red, yellow, or green light, but also give you some feedback as well from a modern workplace perspective, from an Office 365 and Microsoft 365 perspective, your area of readiness when it comes to preparation for Copilot and being able to enable that within your environment. With that said, I wanted to take just a moment to share of two more upcoming events that we have here at Concurrency. One's coming up just next week, really digging into AI in the development space and being able to harness the power of GitHub Copilot X, Copilot Studio, and Azure AI Studio webinar. Who's presenting on that one, Nathan?
Boy, we have Brandon Day, we have Brian Hayden, Jeremiah, and Esma. We have kind of a big crew there that's going to be talking about a lot of those capabilities.
That's exciting. There's a lot of our team working in that AI space. Excited to share that with you and customers. And on February 8th, we also have an in-person event. And that's where is that one being held, Nathan? Is that one on our office?
That is in our office in
Perfect.
Milwaukee. Yep.
So in Brookfield, Milwaukee, we have an in-person AI symposium, and we have how many guest speakers that are presenting at that one?
Oh boy, I think it's 5 companies are coming and presenting.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of the brain trust as it pertains to different companies that we helped work with in that space of AI, and that are all coming together for a fun day on February 8th at the Concurrency office. So hopefully you can come out and join us for that one, or join us next week for the webinar. We've got all the information at concurrency.com. If you want a copy of this presentation, if you can please just fill out our survey and let us know. We'll be happy to get these slides over into your hands. Otherwise, there's been a couple of really good questions that we've seen pop into the chat. Some of them had to do around is there any roadmap for the shared mailboxes? I haven't heard of any yet. I know there is a webinar that I attend monthly for some of the Microsoft partners in the Copilot space, that they'll usually give us some really good information that may not be necessarily easily accessible on Microsoft's Copilot adoption page, but that's also another really good one to visit as well. They've got a awesome site around adoption of Copilot. It covers a lot of these different topics that we covered at more of a broader pace. So definitely recommend checking that out. And if there's any other questions, like I see David has his hand up, would definitely love to hear any questions, thoughts, or feedback that you have. Maybe that was on accident. Might have accidentally hit the wrong button to raise your hand. Maybe it was a react. I've seen that happen. I know I've done it myself. Otherwise, if there's any other questions, definitely feel free to drop them in the chat. We're really happy to answer those for you. Otherwise, that does conclude the presentation for today. We thank you for attending. Certainly fill out that survey to get a copy of the deck. And if you want to fill out that Microsoft 365 Copilot optimization assessment, we'd love to continue to engage with you more down that journey of AI readiness. Otherwise, we'll hang out here for a few minutes if you've got any questions that you want to pop into the chat. Otherwise, thanks and have a great day.